Welcome to Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 44. This is the developer's journey to making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you hot. What's it?
And now Reality OS.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, now Reality OS. All right, let me finish off real quick. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey.
I'm leaving that in.
Yes, I should have added the fact that, yes, now, thanks to WWDC's reveals, VisionOS is going to be a thing and something I'll need to append to my intro going forward. So, having said all that, how did you guys... what do you guys think so far from any? I mean, I totally missed our bingo. I didn't get anything in our bingo card that would actually match bingo, but I don't know. I think it was a pretty good WWDC. Arguably one of the best.
Yeah, I thought it was one of the best WWDCs I've seen in years. It was full of new stuff, not just the VisionOS stuff, but the Swift stuff, SwiftData. Which finally, I was so happy about that one. I actually smiled in a rare event.
But the funny thing is, today is not entirely about just reviewing all that happened in WWDC.
And how poorly we made our bingo cards again.
Yeah, or how poorly we done our bingo cards. We have a guest today. This person I learned about mostly through when I was on my SwiftUI journey. I discovered his YouTube videos discussing a lot of SwiftUI things around core data, actually.
Yeah.
Speaking of SwiftData. So if you've gone around the YouTube rabbit hole for iOS development, his videos come up constantly. And since then I've followed him on Twitter. I have known that he's done a lot of tutorials on Udemy. He is an iOS developer and a content creator. And he is also an instructor. His name is Mohammad Azam. Welcome, Mohammad. Or Azam, as you would like to be called.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you sparing some time. I'm sure you're a very busy person in that regard. I was wondering if you can give our audience an introduction of kind of expound on what we just said. Maybe I know I haven't completely said everything. So
Sure. I started iOS development probably around like 2010. Before that, I was doing a lot of .NET stuff, ASP.NET, C#. So 2010 is where I bought my first iPhone, I bought my first Mac, and started developing applications. And worked for a very large company as a consultant here in Houston, Texas, but also produced my own apps for gardening, which were featured by Apple a long time ago, probably 2013, 2012, if I'm guessing it correctly. And probably around 2015, 2016, I got into Udemy and started creating courses. And now I have more than 40 different courses on iOS, Flutter, web development, so a lot of different technologies. And these days, I do work full-time for a company called Digital Crafts, and I work as a full stack web development instructor. And I've been doing that for last 6 years.
Well, I'm taking the course you did on server-side Swift, and I just purchased the new SwiftData course, which I'm sure we'll be talking about SwiftData today. So I found Azam. I found you on the YouTube as well. I think Coltro, you and I found Azam independently.
yes,
I think I said once, hey, I found this video on on core data or something. Look at this. And he's like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Seen that guy. So you've been your content has been very valuable to us personally in the last year.
Especially around, I think at the time, I was just looking for videos around SwiftUI and particularly around SwiftUI's interactions with core data. Obviously, the two, the two have an interesting relationship in that regard in terms of how they interact. So that I found that to be very helpful in when I was building a few sample projects to try to get a sense of it. What goes into, I guess, what I noticed a lot of your content, at least on YouTube side of things, is around SwiftUI, and that's, I don't know if there's any ones that came before. I think there were actually a few before that, right? So I guess is it fair to say that your YouTube channel is much more Swift focused or iOS development focused in that sense?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think it's mainly iOS development focused. I did recently uploaded some videos for React and Redux and all that stuff, but I would say 99% of the time it is SwiftUI or iOS related videos. And whenever something new comes out, like SwiftData came out, I think last week, so I created like a small video on that because I was already working on a Udemy course for SwiftData, so I published a little bit parts of those courses onto YouTube just so that people will have an idea. So yeah, most of them I would say, as you said, it's SwiftUI, SwiftData, or iOS related.
I was wondering, just as a broad stroke, in how you felt about the WWDC reveals. What did you think about around Swift and maybe even to some degree about the VisionOS?
Yeah, I was definitely excited with the Swift data part, obviously, and the new advancements in the Swift that they're doing, like the Swift macros, and hopefully Swift macros will become much easier to write because right now it's a lot of stuff going on in Swift macros that if you need to create a macro, then it's a lot of work that you have to set up to create those things. But I think it might just become a little bit easier. For the vision stuff, I've always been interested in augmented reality, like playing around with ARKit, then RealityKit. So definitely, I think it's a step forward, and I'm looking forward playing with VisionOS or the new stuff that they published. I haven't really seen any videos, WWDC videos on it at this point, but once I started watching those videos, learning from them, I'm definitely going to try it out because I think you can just run it in your Xcode or in your simulator, like your desktop simulator. So I don't have to buy a device to see it in action. I can just use my desktop computer.
Oh, yeah, when they release the SDK, sometime in the next month or so.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do. You should be able to do like regular 2D applications. I think through simulator. I mean, you might be able to do everything, but the I don't. Where did I see this? I thought I saw an interview or something text that said that they were going to have Apple was going to let you submit things for them to review and give you feedback on.
Yeah,
because like there's not going to be a lot of these available at first, so like they want
they're not going to sell you a dev kit.
I mean, I don't know. I think there's probably going to be an application process.
Azam, are you gonna get one?
No,
you're gonna get a
no. Yeah, 30, I don't know.
30 starting at 3,500.
That's. I mean, that's probably not what the dev kit is going to be, right? And it would be refundable, sure. But still, sure. I don't know.
I mean, why not?
So just based on the like firsthand accounts, like if you watched the talk show that came out yesterday, the John Gruber's talk show. They do talk about he talks about his experience in there, and I've read some other reviews. I saw Joanna Stern's video about it. It seems really remarkable, like something that I want to try. And even without having used it, just the consistency of the positive feedback from everybody who's gone through the Golden Path demo, is what I call it, is really tells me that this is something special. It's not really equivalent to what we've seen before in the market, just in terms of its sophistication. And Apple seems really intent on trying to make something that you can do things with. So it's not just an entertainment-focused device. But I also got the strong impression that they're not 100% sure what those things are. And they really want developers to spend this time before next year coming up with ideas. You know, at least that's my impression. Maybe I'm wrong.
Did you have any particular inspirations that you're willing to share in that sense, Azam? Or is that something that you're actually targeting as an opportunity for yourself?
I think, I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think I'm expecting that it may take maybe half a decade for it to be more like a 5 years or even 8 years to be at the point that where it's more useful. Because right now it's very much like bulky, and you can probably just wear it just kind of like indoors, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if they and this is like future, it might be like 8 years, it might be like 20 years. What I at least want is that you cannot make a distinction between AR glasses and just the glasses that I'm wearing, like normal glasses. So I can just take it outside, and then I can see all those AR related stuff and not look dorky wearing those big stuff or hanging around.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to be a Google Glass hole and just like take
kind of
pictures
like I guess kind of like Google Glasses, but with all the features, with all the features that Apple unveiled, so all of that. But obviously, it's very hard to do that kind of like a lightweight version of it. I don't even know if it's possible. I think it might be possible, but we're not there yet. Yeah.
No, not anywhere close. I think that's why they, Apple released it the way it is, because I think they definitely have the same idea you have. They would prefer something like that. It's just technically impossible right now. I mean, this to me seems like the single most advanced take at this kind of product that we've ever seen. Like, I think that's fair to say. Like, no one's come close to this level of sophistication on the market anyway. So if this is the best we can do, it's impressive, but it's still nowhere near what we all want, which is exactly what you're describing. I mean, I wear sunglasses all the time. I have blue eyes, very sensitive to the sun. So if I could wear sunglasses and then later, prescription glasses, I'm sure I'll need them at some point, then, that's what I would want too. I want to be able to just wear them and get all that AR stuff. And it does seem like Vision Pro and VisionOS is primarily focused on augmented reality, not on full VR. Now, you can dial it in. They talk about having these full experiences, but even when they talk about the full experience, they start by saying, you can integrate it into your environment. Like they demo with like the planets or something, like in a museum I saw. It was in the museum. It was in the physical space. And then you can dial and have it seem like you're in space. Yeah. But they keep focusing primarily on AR, and then they also have features like if someone's looking at you and they come in the room or something, it'll show them coming in, so you can see them kind of coming into your space. So and then if you look at them, they'll see your eyes. Like all these features to make it less isolating than I think most of these products have been up till this point. Right. So I think that gives you an idea of that Apple's on that trajectory towards AR.
Yeah, and I do have a question, since I haven't watched any video. I was so busy with other stuff, but I do have a question. So maybe Aaron will have the answer to that. If right now I want to make a vision application with all this augmented reality on my desktop, is it possible to simulate that stuff, or they haven't, or is it not?
It will be when they release the SDK.
Okay.
This was kind of a rare thing where they showed off an SDK and didn't actually release it.
Okay.
So it'll be coming out in, I don't know. They didn't give an exact date, but
they said
sometime
they implied
later
July.
this month or July.
Yeah, they implied July.
They also said early next year.
That was for the
device.
Okay.
But during the talk show, Gruber asked them about like what's early next year means. They're like early next year.
So you can assume March.
Yeah, so I was like, I can assume March or April.
Q1.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a little unusual for Apple, right? I mean, they did release SDKs early for Apple Silicon, but I don't remember the last time they said, maybe it was the iPhone where they said here's our new thing, the thing is the iPhone, you didn't have an SDK until version 2, right? So you didn't have it until the next year when you can actually buy phones. Or is it 3?
No, it was
version 2.
Because remember the time when they were like, hey, here's an SDK. It's called Web Apps.
Okay, yeah, I blanked that out of my memory. The sweet solution. Oh, that was so late.
And that was like 1 year. That was 1 year, and then
then we get the SDK.
That,
but what I mean is, I don't remember last time they said here's a product. We don't even have an SDK for you yet. But we hope that you'll build stuff for this, even though it's not coming out until early next year. I mean, I understand why they had to do it, but it does feel a little unusual.
I think maybe WatchOS was probably the closest. I mean, they still gave you the SDK, but they didn't give it to you right off.
Yeah.
They didn't give that one right off the bat. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's close though. It's getting on the borderline of like a very non-Apple thing where they normally do not show unfinished stuff. And this is not unfinished, but it's definitely far from finished. You know what I mean? Like all the demos were the same 30-minute golden path demo with under strict supervision. Certain features no one's tried yet, like the button for taking photos and stuff. So it definitely feels like, and they'll admit that the software is far from ready.
So Azam, I was just kind of curious. Aside from core data, SwiftData, was there anything, any new frameworks or anything from or aside from, I guess, data and macros that caught your interest, that piqued your interest, I should say?
Yeah, I think MapKit inclusion in SwiftUI, I think the MapKit is definitely much more powerful. I think that's what something that they included, and something called like a Open API. I think that's for like a documentation, writing the documentation for your Vapor or server-side apps. So that's something that they included also, like for all the.
I didn't know about that.
Wait, how does that work again?
I haven't watched the video, but I think it's some sort of automated tool that's going to write endpoint. You can test your endpoints and all of that stuff, but I haven't watched any of those videos yet.
I meant to watch
but
that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually haven't really watched most. I mean, the most of the videos I watch are pretty much SwiftData, but I am planning to watch. I do have a long flight coming up, so I'll watch in those videos in the flight.
Got a few hundred hours. So
I mean, just do it at 2x. You should be okay.
Yeah, I mean, some of them I can't do too. Some of them got to do it like slower than 2x.
Sometimes.
But it's there's a lot of content this year. I watched a lot of videos, but
that's with macro. I feel like I'm gonna have to watch that at least 10 times to even grok what's going on.
I mean, I like the implementation of Swift macros. It's
just open the template and play around with it.
I know.
Well, yeah, but the Swift macros thing is a good one to talk about briefly because Swift macros are the foundation for some other features like SwiftData, Observable, and Model. Like what's a little confusing is that there's a type of macro that when you use it looks exactly like a property wrapper, but it's not. So that I found kind of understand why they did that. But it's a little bit confusing because at the call site you can't tell them apart.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You can inspect a macro,
yes,
like its implementation, but you can't inspect a property wrapper.
Correct.
Was that okay?
Because a property wrapper is just like a defined, what is it, like a protocol that you implement. So yeah, they don't have any way of looking at that, but the macros they do because the macros are just creating Swift code. So rewriting your code or adding your code. They have like a bunch of different types depending on the use case for them, what you're having them do and what they apply to.
Oh,
yeah, they need to work on those names.
Yeah, too many
types. The names are like
when V2 they'll like collapse them all down to like 3, like they did with the SwiftData property wrappers.
But you know, with the macro support and observable, they're obviously removing combine, or they're removing the parts of combine like that we deal with. I don't know if they're still implementing it with like combine and background. I don't know, but they're simplifying things a lot. As I said, state, environment, bindable are the 3 like property wrappers you need to worry about now.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong about understanding this, bindables is kind of like binding, but
it's for
binding for observable.
Yeah.
Variables.
So it lets you. I think the big thing is like it all works with the observable stuff. So if you have something that's bindable, like you can query the key paths on the object all the way up.
Okay.
I think the thing about observable that seems to be that it's just more more advanced than we've had before. So not only does it the stuff because it's using a macro to set it up. Make it easier to do it. You don't have to publish on everything, but they made a big deal about how you could, you didn't have to mark things as observed objects, and you could just kind of grab the key paths, like the properties on the thing, and everything would just kind of work. So I don't know. It's a little bit confusing. I agree though that it seems a little bit confusing because like they have a binding and a bindable, and like I think that the thing is you just use one with observable and one if you're not using observable. I think that's what we're doing because they haven't officially deprecated it, and I didn't see the documentation.
No.
Yeah, I think someone posted on Twitter that they had a chat with one of the Apple engineers, and he asked the question that are these things just going away? Like binding is going away, and we should start using bindable. And the Apple engineer told the same thing that no, they're not going away, but they're used for different purposes. Because bindable is for observable macro, and observable macro can only be applied to class or reference type. So, so it's not even going to work on structs, I guess, or value types. So if you do have a value type, probably you should use binding. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And this is still iOS 17 only for this stuff. So if you want to, if you're building something like I'm building something now, I would love to use some of this stuff, but I may have to just keep using the iOS 16 stuff, and then transition later. But fortunately, it does seem relatively easy and straightforward to switch something. So if you have an observable object, switching it to model is mostly deleting code in most implementations. So I think that's going to be really cool. So I think it'll be an easier path to migrate to this than maybe you might expect.
I have a question about SwiftData. I don't know if you've messed around at all with SwiftData's integration with CloudKit, if that's how you handle the persistent shared containers. So if I wanted to share between two iCloud users, basically, how does SwiftData handle that, or does it handle that, or is that an unknown?
Yeah, I have not played that much with iCloud or CloudKit, especially with SwiftData yet. So I know that their properties have to be marked optional. I mean, I might be wrong on this one, but if you want to sync something, I think those properties have to be marked optional to be synced to iCloud. But not.
Oh no!
I don't. I'm still guessing. I might be completely wrong on this one. But or maybe the relationship have to be marked optional. One of these things have to be marked optional.
Well, I mean, it seems like SwiftData is it's still using a lot of the core data persistence layer stuff. So I would assume that hasn't really necessarily changed too much, the level of the stack that's doing the syncing. So that would make sense if you still had to take into account.
Because I feel like the pathway to just doing a straight core data CloudKit sync is fairly straightforward still, right? If you're using SwiftData, SwiftData core, CloudKit integration. That's what I'm hoping, because in that world, like if all you care about is just storing a synced copy on CloudKit, all you're just doing is changing your models locally, and assuming that you do your correct configurations on CloudKit side, it all works with very little setup. I'm just sort of curious if I want to get a little cute with it, like have a public database, for example. How does that how would that work? But
apparently none of us got to that part of the documentation in the week, because I didn't
watch that video yet.
No, I watched all the videos on SwiftData directly, but I didn't watch anything that was about the cloud, about the cloud stuff. So we all missed that. But you know what I did do? I did go into the Slack channel, and I found a really interesting question. Someone was asking about how do you build more elaborate apps with with this stuff, and the answer struck me as very much what Azam here wrote about in his giant architecture paper, architecture patterns.
We'll have a link to.
Yeah, we'll have a link to it, because it was very similar. They were like, basically the Apple engineer was like, yeah, you can have like a container view that interfaces with your model directly, and then you can create like observables, smaller subset of observables, and pass them down or pass them through the environment that way. And so you can have different things. You can have different subgroups of your views can have different pieces attached to them that you would mostly use to go through the environment. So it's in here. I couldn't figure out how to get a link to it to share it, but it's in there, and I was like, wow, this sounds exactly like what Azam was writing about. So I don't know if it's just you just discovered what they were doing, or like they read your stuff. I don't know which way it went, but I'm going to say that you inspired Apple there.
I mean, I think with SwiftData, especially with the core data, and there are some examples with SwiftData. I think it's called birding example or some sort of a birding app.
The backyard birds.
Backyard birds.
Yeah.
And again, they're inserting the data kind of like a hard-coded data, at least from what I read. I mean, they're not really allowing user to insert it. I might be wrong, but it's just that when the app starts, they just generate the data and they insert it into the database and they just use that data, at least when I search for it.
Yeah.
But it looks like, well, since they're not inserting it, it kind of felt like that they are trying to use a little bit like active record pattern, although they were not really inserting it inside their models. But in other words, if I had to create a SwiftData app, I would probably use something similar to active record pattern because it kind of blends in nicely in there, because it's kind of like a similar to ORM.
Yeah, so the active record meaning like in the model class would have like a function that said save or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. We were looking at the backyard birds, Kotro and I, at the Philly Coca meeting this week, and it's pretty well architected. So what they do is they do create a like a database for the previews to use, and they insert all this data in there. It's because it's really just core data with a better front end for Swift. So they do a similar thing to what you would do in core data, and they create this container for it, but and then they have a bunch of data that they generate for it. It's pretty well architected, this thing. Actually, it's a good example app.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny. Like they got rid of the whole model diagram or.
They got rid of that a while ago.
They expect you to do that all in the
core data,
code.
And that should have been a flag or a clue to us that they were going to go this route, because they're all about code first. And although I miss that view, I like to be able to see the relationships graphically. But maybe someone will make a third party app to do that or something.
So you've explored different Swift architecture patterns, from what I remember: MVVM, Coordinator, Viper. Is there? Do you have any suggestions or which architecture works best when?
Yeah, so I've used MVVM. I used the Redux architecture. And the container model, which is very common in React applications. I started with actually MVVM, just like most or pretty much everyone in 2019. But after working for a couple of years, it wasn't really working out because I was just writing way too much code to achieve very little. And I was ending up with like view models after view model after view model for nothing. And most of my apps were server and client-based or client-server-based applications. So the source of truth in that was the server. So the source of truth wasn't really changing. It was always the server. So I went online, researched it, checked out a lot of different Apple videos, especially I think it's called Data Essentials in SwiftUI.
Something like that. I remember from a few years ago. Really
That's
excellent.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And I think they have code sample for food truck application and Fruta application. But the food truck application was using some sort of hard-coded stuff like JSON files or something. And most people don't know that they actually did created a web version of food truck application, and they showed like a split-second clip of that in one of the session called Xcode server-side Swift, something like that.
Ooh.
In 2021. It's literally for a split second they show that code, and I stumbled upon that code, but after I have already implemented the way that I was implementing it correctly. So that was just validating that, so Apple is also implementing it this way. That is exactly the same thing I'm doing. The only difference was I was using a class as my HTTP client or a web service, and Apple was using a struct. So I started using struct because there's no need to use a class because it's all like stateless. But anyway, I mean, I moved from MVVM to something that people call it MV, which is just remove the view model, because the view itself is the view model. So you don't really need another layer of anything. And that does not mean that you should just shove everything inside your view. That simply means that in a client server app, your view is going to talk to some sort of a model. I like to call aggregate model because that just provides the data to the whole app. But you can have multiple aggregate models. And the aggregate model is going to use some sort of HTTP client to make the request, get the data, and then populate the published properties, which I guess in iOS 17 will no longer be published, just some normal stuff. And you can use that aggregate model in many different ways. I usually just inject it into an environment object so that everyone has access to it, and I'm done. So it's nice and easy and simple to understand. And I think that was the main problem, that it was so simple that other developers, when they read that or when they experienced that, they were like, this cannot be right because it's so simple.
Yeah. You know, and the Swift data, the Swift data implementation is basically that. Like they talk about, you set up your container, and you're probably going to do it off of the app or like the scene, high up in your view hierarchy, and you're just going to say, here's my container and here's my model, and you only need to give it the root object, and it will infer. It'll follow all the properties in there to so you don't have to actually put in every single model class that you have in when you're setting up your container.
Yeah.
And that's what I understood it to be anyway, which is like exactly like what you're talking about. So the way I understand it was, in my mind when I was reading this, I said that's Azam's. That's aggregate root right there. You create your model, your models, and all the pieces of your model, and you can just put them all in there, or you can split it up and have multiple containers if you want. They talk about that too. So if you have part of your app that uses something that's not being used elsewhere in the app, you don't need to have it all in the one aggregate root. You can just inject it at that point. So they made it very, very simple to do. So you need just as far as I understand, you just need like the top level of the model that you want to track in SwiftData, and that has to be properly annotated, obviously, because by default it'll just look at all the properties and assume they're part of your model. And then that's it. You just do that, and you can set up containers however you want. Because there's no child containers, I think, anymore, like in core data, or there's no child context. So the way I think you do that kind of thing is just with other containers, like model containers.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found when I use the aggregate model pattern in the core data application, or even if you want to use in Swift data, that's fine. But even in Apple example, what usually end up happening is in your view, you are persisting the information you're writing. Sometimes you're even writing your logic to persist that.
Yeah.
I guess then you'll have to validate that if you want to do that, that's fine. I mean, if you somehow can isolate the logic, the actual domain of your code inside the model, then it would be perfectly fine.
Well, that's exactly what Apple does in their Backyard Birds app.
Yeah.
Like they have a model, or they actually have more than one model. They have like a backyard model, they have a bird model, and then they have a whole bunch of other types that are part of that overall model. So they have a class called like backyard, if I'm remembering this right, and then there's like other types of backyards. There's like a bird model, and then there's like different properties of a bird, and they're all different models, and they have them in directories. Mm-hmm. And then on the model class itself, there's functions to do things, to manipulate things, and I think that's what I'm saying. I think they're on the same page, or as you are with this, where the idea is that you at least at some level, as I said in that Slack discussion, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, the one idea of structuring a complicated app was to have like a container view that directly accesses your model. And then you can create whatever kind of form, like a view model form, whatever you want to call it, to send to down the view hierarchy if you want. Or you can attach it to as an environment object somewhere else too in your view hierarchy. Like however you want to inject it in there. There's really only two ways to inject things in SwiftUI, right? You can do it through the init, and you pass it directly, or you can do it through environment. And what Apple seems to be doing this year is really saying, hey, the preferred way of doing this stuff is environment now. They're really pushing. That's why they said that you have state and environment now. Because to me, this is telling me that the kind of architecture patterns are going to work best, most naturally. With SwiftUI are going to be ones where you're grabbing the model from the environment and then doing things, and that's how it goes. And then you're injecting state to maybe child views in a limited way. Like if you just need to have like a detail screen or something, that makes sense. You're not going to, you're going to say, I want this particular thing. But then besides that, you're going to have everything just through the environment, which I know can feel really dirty to some developers, I guess. But it makes sense to me. I mean, I think they've improved how with Observable that your UI will not update unnecessarily. I think that's been an issue with some larger observable object type of models where like if any part of the view touched it, like it would if somewhere else you updated something else, because the whole observable object would trigger like a view update or something like that. So does Aaron is that true, Aaron? There was an issue with like excessive view updating if you had like a complicated object.
I think so. I don't know,
but they made a big deal about mentioning it this year.
I think it was. I think it may have been related to whenever something changes, the view needs to be evaluated, which is like a diffing, and which was pretty fast anyways. So I don't know if it was causing any issues. So now, at least from my understanding, they're saying that the view is not even going to get evaluated unless it's going to re-render. So that small performance hit that you were getting, now it's going to be gone.
I was wondering, speaking of Swift architecture, the Swift server side of things, how has that evolved? Since I remember maybe 1 year ago, people were like, "Oh, that's not an option. It doesn't have this or that." Like, are we at a point where Swift on the server side Swift can be considered a production ready kind of architecture choice for a backend architecture?
Yeah. I think I use Vapor 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think we're now in the 5th version, I believe. I think in all the versions till like 4, they were using some sort of like an event loop, like a future-based architecture, which was a little bit more complicated to understand. But in Vapor 5 or whatever the latest version is, they have changed it to async and await. And that made a lot of difference because now it's much more intuitive, much more seamless. It's basically like I'm writing an Express or Node application. So it's much nicer to work with. And it's just much cleaner. I think there are a lot of companies. Apple is using Vapor at some parts. I think BMW is using, I think at some parts. There are not as many companies as if you compare it to ASP.NET or Ruby on Rails or Express and Node, but there are some companies that are using it on production. So it's definitely have really evolved in a very positive direction.
Well, would you build a server with Swift? Like, what would be your go-to choice right now to build like a kind of standard API server for something, not too complicated?
So I would probably use Express, but my reasoning for using Express is because of the language JavaScript. Now, not like JavaScript is good or bad or anything, but I think the main advantage, or one of the main advantage you get from using some sort of a dynamic language is that you can just quickly create these anonymous types and return it. So they're not like strongly bound to something. But if I had to do the same thing in ASP.NET using C# or even Vapor with Swift, I have to create a type that I'm returning. And then I have to create a type on the client side because that's going to be the one who's consuming it. Or I can create a Swift package and then share the types between them. So that is extra work.
So if you use something like Vapor, you can actually you do something like share the types between both clients. But yeah, I've done C#. I used to do a lot of Perl, and one of the things that I've always felt about a lot of these languages, the more type specific languages, I like the dynamic languages for doing backends. I mean, I liked it for that very reason. And Swift to me, even to this day, feels like often like I'm in a straitjacket. They made it a lot nicer, like a lot easier to build these types now. There's a lot less ceremony as they go on and evolve the language, which is really helpful. But it's still there. There's just everything. There's so much types and there's protocols, and it's like, oh my god. But and doing on the server side, I haven't tried it with Swift, but when I did it with C#, I had that same experience. I was like, now I got to create a type, and then I got to create a whole tree of types, just to model something pretty simple. And and depending on the version of C#, that's easier or more ceremony.
So what is Swift missing to get it to that?
Maybe if they can, and I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe they can include some way to create these anonymous objects, which obviously is going completely against what Swift is telling us to be saved and strongly typed. Because now, if you do that, if you allow that, then everybody is going to be like, okay, forget it. I'm just going to use anonymous object. No more classes, no more structs, which is obviously going completely against everything that they are teaching us. So I don't think that's going to happen, but that is something missing.
Well, it's like people like going with type erasers all the time. They're like, don't do that. Yeah, I mean, this is like a philosophical problem. We're never gonna resolve this because the fundamental design assumptions of Swift were that it needs this, and it does have certain advantages, but there's always going to be a contingent that I am part of, and it sounds like maybe Azam is somewhat of a part of this too, that really sees a lot of value in the dynamic language approach when you know what you're doing and when you maybe are using appropriate testing procedures around it. Like that was the thing with Perl. Perl worked great as long as you did TDD, essentially. Like that's what I used to do. I wrote all these tests for everything because that was the only way you would know, because you didn't get any help from the compiler, really. Like there was no compiling going on. So it was that's the thing I would say about dynamic languages, that even more than you should be doing testing or test-driven development to some degree for stuff, you absolutely have to be doing dynamic things. So I haven't tried anything with the back end, but your course is making me interested in doing it for that very reason you said earlier about being able to share some of the Swift types. Because if I'm for my personal project, like a side project, I'm not going to be making an Android app. At least not anytime soon. I'm probably not going to be making like a full-fledged web app. I'm probably going to be making an iOS app or a VisionOS app or something. And so, it might actually be more efficient for me to just do a back end in Swift and just kill two birds with one stone or whatever.
I guess I am curious about slightly off topic in this sense, but
we have topics on this podcast?
No, we always go off the rails constantly. Azam, I was thinking you have a lot of different mix of topics that you talk about, whether through your YouTube video, your articles, or whatever, or your Udemy courses. Do you have anything that sort of drives that decision of which topics you pick?
For the courses, it really, I guess it really depends. Like right now I'm working with, you already know, SwiftData course. Sometimes on Udemy, it is good to be the first. Sometimes, not always. And I think it maybe in SwiftData that can be those things. So that's why I created like a 2-hour course and I published it. Obviously, I'm just adding new content to it. So the things that really interest me are data related, augmented reality, a little bit definitely. That is usually new things definitely drive me towards whatever I'm building the course. Or if I can create a course and I'm also trying to do a workshop on it. So I'm also working on a CreateML course because I have to go to New York in September and do a workshop on CreateML on TriSwift. So that's why I'm also working on a CreateML course. I'll kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Oh, do you have a preview of what you're going to talk about with CreateML?
Yeah, I think it will be a workshop, so it will be very much hands-on. It will start with basically just integrating an existing model to your Swift application. All the code for Swift application is already written, so nobody needs to write anything over there. Then there will be object detection. So everything is using CreateML. So mostly it's like you're just clicking buttons. Sometime you will have to jump into playgrounds to use CreateML. So I'll show you that. Object detection, image recognition, sentiment analysis, which kind of works. It doesn't work all the time because it's kind of, you have to find out the sentiment. Is it like a positive sentiment or negative sentiment? So I'm just using financial news to create those sentiments, or to create the positive and negative. And then we have a tabular data to find out the prices of used car sales for only Honda and Toyota, apart from a long sales of car. And the final thing that I haven't started is the on-device learning. So I haven't really started on that, but that will be the last section. Yeah.
Is this a course that you have? It's in development, or do you have a course about CreateML?
No, this
right
is
now?
currently in development. So,
In development, yeah,
so I haven't released it yet.
It's gonna be another course I'm gonna buy. Because like we're actually really interested in this stuff. We haven't done much. I haven't done much directly on it. A few years ago, I was trying to mess around with it a little bit. I think you
Aaron's
from
done a fair
Aaron.
bit.
Aaron has, right? Done a lot of
Aaron
CreateML
particularly.
stuff.
Well, I've done some like Python data science stuff, not too much with CreateML. So it's interesting to see like the tabular data framework is like, seems like it's really trying to mimic some of the stuff they're doing in Python.
Oh, I didn't even see that talk. There's a talk about it, or
I don't know if there is.
I didn't see anything about that.
It exists.
So there's a tab. What is it?
It's a thing for representing data. So,
in tabular form.
Yep. Yeah.
It's in the name,
It's got
Steve.
all these
We
things
do
for
it.
like manipulating and
or analyzing. Is
analyzing
that a fair
data.
assessment of like what it would do? So
yeah,
like
whatever.
this list
They represent it as like, oh, you're going to use this data to train a machine learning model, and it's like a really convenient format without getting into something complicated.
Nice. Like I think one of the examples for the tabular that I'm going to use probably in the course and in the workshop will be if you have a spreadsheet of car prices and you have columns like year of the car, make of the car, the model of the car, and the miles driven, then you can use that particular spreadsheet. You can import the CSV file into your model. You can train a model that can predict prices for the car based on the data that you have. So
that's cool. I remember the talk from a couple years ago where they were doing stuff with visual things. That was really interesting to me. Where they did like an exercise app that would like count how many sit-ups you're doing or something like that. I was looking at doing one of them at the time. I don't think I had I think it was a little while ago. I don't think I had an M1 or anything at the time. So the last time I tried to do something with CreateML was like an old Intel machine. And it was like too slow. But I thought about doing that. You needed to get a whole bunch of data for the training, and I remember that was a bit of a problem for me at the time. So I couldn't get access to it. But you can do this with visual stuff too. What I'm saying, so you can build apps and there are some award-winning apps that I think are built on this kind of technique where it'll examine like basketball throws or golf swing techniques, stuff like that, and that's all machine learning stuff, right? And so. You can do some cool stuff, and it's a lot easier to do on Apple's platforms than you might expect.
Just out of curiosity, are you planning to have like a demo or some kind of workshop around image detection? So like using the CreateML app to take a whole bunch of images. Let's say, I think the typical example is like different types of vegetables and be able to detect them and how you can organize them properly and properly label each one. So that will be a part of the workshop. It will be part of the course. And I think you'll find that it's so simple, like literally you're just creating folders if you're using CreateML and you're just labeling them. This is a tomato, this is a, something else, this is a pepper. And you're just feeding the whole folder to CreateML and CreateML will create the model for you and you're done.
Yeah, that was my brief experience trying to use it. Was just you create folders.
I tried, but
stuff,
it just wasn't like, oh, that's not a tomato.
Well, maybe you didn't have enough. It takes a lot of data, and you have to have.
Do you have like a minimum suggestion in terms of that in that regard? Like I've heard it was like you could minimally do like get away with like 10 to 20, but maybe I need more.
Yeah, 10 to 20 should be okay.
Like vegetables.
Yeah, of course, if the vegetable that you're training on and then you are validating. Or like a very different color tomato, then it will be like, okay, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, you need to validate models with data they weren't trained with.
Yeah,
that's something that I don't know if they probably mentioned that somewhere, but like if you don't do that, you don't know if it works.
I guess the fascinating thing is like how would you go about saying like it's you have a large vegetable set of categories of like, okay, this is a model for vegetables, right? But then you have like a red tomato, green tomato, but it's in a tomato. So basically, it's like a hierarchy, right? So there's tomato, and then green and red. Do you break those down? Or is that something where is that something where you like? How would you break that down if you had to? Could you get away with like sort of like a multi-level categorizing? So I want to know if this is a tomato, and then I want to know that it's a green or a red one.
I don't know. I think you will have to just label them like red tomato, and all the folder contains all the red tomatoes, and then the green tomato will have all the green tomatoes. But I don't know. I don't think you can do a hierarchy of like, oh, it's a tomato, and then, oh, this is a tomato, but this is a red tomato. I think it's just going to be based on the labels that you have.
You could probably train it to recognize tomatoes regardless of their color.
Yeah.
With enough data.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
I guess
it's
one of those things where it's like the dog example, right? Or like animal examples. Like I want a model that examines all the animals, right? But then let's say, okay, I identify this as a dog, but is it a terrier? Is it a hot dog?
That's in iOS 17 now, right? They have a dog and a cat classifier built in. So if you take a photo, it has a little button of the cat or dog, and it tells you what it is. It tells you what type of dog it is. So they must have done that. And there are, I don't know where they get the data from, but there are sources of data you can use. You don't have to like create it all yourself. If it's something like that, like dogs, you can find databases of dog pictures of. That's I don't know where exactly you get that stuff from, but it exists. I know.
Yeah.
other people created databases.
I guess speaking of machine learning, I believe you've done some tutorials around ChatGPT and integration with ChatGPT. Where do you fall on that sort of like? How do you feel about it having experimented with it? Where do you think it belongs in our, for us? Like, where do you think Apple is going to take us? I know like they've been very good about like obfuscating a lot of that conversation to being much more of a passive relationship. Whereas as opposed to like Microsoft was like, they explicitly say, oh yeah, you can have Copilot do, the suggested code for this test or whatever.
Yeah. I personally use ChatGPT a lot, pretty much like every day. Whenever I'm writing a YouTube description, that's mainly ChatGPT. Suggesting a title for my video, that's ChatGPT. If I'm writing a corporate email, I would paste the email in my wording, and then I will just tell ChatGPT, improve the English or improve it. And then it will just make it much better. Udemy description, Udemy course titles, everything is done by ChatGPT. For the coding perspective, I definitely do ask ChatGPT for things like if I have to create an extension to convert something from something. So these kind of things. I think it's okay to use ChatGPT, but just making sure that you understand what it is writing. It's not all magic. You have to know what that ChatGPT is actually doing. So that's what I also tell my students, that yeah, you can use any resource that you want, but you have to make sure that you understand, because I am going to review your code and I'm going to ask you what that means.
Yeah, that was the experience of Zorn, one of our Filicoca friends here, who was he's using Copilot, GitHub Copilot, that you have to be able to understand the code that it generates, or you can get yourself into trouble really fast. I noticed also that this was blown by in the keynote, I think, but they did mention that they were using like language models in a few times, like they're using it for the
transformers.
They're using transformers, yeah, they're using it for the autocorrect for the keyboard. But I did not hear anyone say this, but I wonder if they're not also doing that for Xcode, because they do mention they have a talk and they talk about Xcode features, and they say in the what's new in Xcode, they talk about the auto what do we call that, like the code complete that's in there, and they talk about how it's smarter now, and they don't say transform model, but I wonder if they're doing that, because they say stuff like if you have a text view, you say dot, and then font is going to come up first because font is the most likely use. And I'm like, well, how do you know what the most likely use thing is unless you've perhaps trained a model on a bunch of uses? Anyway, it gave me the feeling that they might be inching towards something like Copilot in Xcode, but either they're implementing it differently or they still want to mention it. But I mean, this could be the precursor to something more advanced because it is. It starts as an improvement of autocomplete, and then it could go into the what you kind of see on the GitHub side where it can just ask it for code snippets. I could see that happening next year. That's what I'm saying.
Definitely.
And I just got the sense there was a lot of they mentioned this on Gruber's on the talk show, the live talk show, that they even said we didn't say AI ever like during the keynote, but that AI is and machine learning stuff is all over the place on all the new features. All of VisionOS is full of that. Then you have specific mentions of transformer models in there. Like Apple's approach this, and they say this in the talk shows. I really recommend watching that. It's like a movie length, but and they talk about how they're really focused on the experience, the product, like the task you're trying to perform, not so much the technology, like whatever helps you get there. And so a lot of this AI tech is very useful to get you there, but Apple's probably not going to start having advertising campaigns saying we have LLMs everywhere, like seems like what Microsoft and Google seem to be doing nowadays.
Now that I think about the wide range of content that you do provide as a content creator, quote unquote, I hate that term, but we'll go with it since it's the common lexicon.
I'm going with digital creator nowadays. It's a little less offensive to me.
Digital creator. Like, if we had to go down the list of could you go through pretty much all the content you quote unquote do create? I feel like I miss a few.
I mean, like types of stuff.
Yeah, just what all the stuff that you like, whether it's a tweet, with a video, whether it's a YouTube video, etc., etc.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter, so I'm posting like tips and maybe article links or something like that. Azamsharp.com is my website where I post articles. Usually I don't really write that many articles because when I'm writing, it usually takes a long time to write those articles for architectural stuff. So it does take a while to write those.
Well, thank you for writing them because I really appreciate them.
Yeah.
And YouTube, I'm a little bit less active on YouTube, I would say. I mean, there are a lot of YouTubers who are way more active. And that's mainly reason is because I'm more focused onto Udemy and just creating some courses on Udemy. So Udemy is where I'm most active because I'm always working on some courses. Apart from that, I do have some courses on LinkedIn that are licensed to LinkedIn, but you can always find those courses on Udemy also. And apart from that, I do presentations and all that stuff. I was at New York Swifty a couple of months ago, maybe, and then again I'll be at TriSwift in September. So yeah.
Which one tends to take the most time to flesh out, I guess?
Definitely Udemy, because those courses they can be long. But over the course of since I've been recording in one form or the other since 2006, now I have developed this skill where I can just record the whole 30-minute video without any editing, without any break at one go, and just not edit anything and just upload it and be done with it. So wow. I would say that if you're watching one of my Udemy courses, there's a very good chance that editing was maybe less than 1%.
I got the impression that you might be doing that because there's occasionally where something will go wrong, and you'll just be like, let's figure out why this is, and you'll just go with it, like you would at a live demo. And if you were editing it, you probably would have just edited that whole little chunk out.
Yeah.
But it works because it keeps the conversation going. It feels very authentic and realistic, and it's not so often that it interferes with understanding what you're trying to present. You've gotten very good at doing that. It's actually something I'm trying to do with podcasting and content creation, because I outside of this podcast, I do other stuff I'm trying to put on YouTube, and it's like the editing is so time intensive. So,
I think the only time I edit is if something happens, like maybe there's some outside noise, or if I'm like completely stuck because of some sort of unknown error or something going on. That's the only time I would say, okay, I would take that part out and re-record it.
So tips and tricks for creating these kinds of screencasts. I guess you create it first, I'm guessing, right? And then you recreate it in the video. You're not like going from zero, just recording yourself. And
is that good?
Yeah, well, it could be that good, yeah.
No, but so I do. No, as you said, I do create all the code beforehand. Yes.
Right, and then I noticed you must have like a file somewhere you're copying pasting from.
Yes. On a separate screen where I have the code which already works because I've already written that code. I would, if there is a place where I have to copy paste it, then yes, I'll just copy paste it from there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I don't know what they're doing in keynotes or in videos from Apple. They always used to have the keyboard shortcuts. That's still a thing in Xcode where you can have the shortcuts for content. What the heck was it called? It was like a little section.
Code snippets.
Yeah, you can still do that in Xcode.
Yeah,
they used to do that all the time. So that kind of thing is useful.
Okay.
And otherwise, just do it a lot until you're good enough to do it one take, like Azam.
Yeah, and no script, because I know that there are some content creators who are actually reading a script. I tried scripting once when I was at LinkedIn recording in California, and they said, you go ahead and write a script and make sure you have a script. And when I did that, I hated it. I was like, I can't do it with a script. I mean, I'm pausing all the time. I don't know where I am in the script, so I'm just gonna wing it. So that was just much better.
No, I mean, I think it works for your content. I enjoy watching you program stuff, which it sounds very boring, and it is often very boring for a lot of presenters who don't have the ability to just be so good off the cuff as you have. Obviously, you practice it a lot. So
I just remember one of my younger iOS developer colleagues saying, just being amused by the fact that I was actually looking for articles.
Oh yeah,
as opposed to watching videos.
yeah.
So
I was like, I want it written down.
You're right with the. Are you doing any other, or is there plans to do any other platforms, whether it be like Facebook or Instagram, or do short form videos like TikTok or anything like that?
No, there are no TikTok. No, I don't think I'm on Instagram. I think I may have an account which never got updated, but no, just Udemy for now, and some videos I post on YouTube. Yeah.
So out of all the platforms that you're on, I assume Udemy is more of your bread and butter, and the other ones are more like ancillary sources of income, or
Udemy is definitely the most that obviously generates the revenue. YouTube doesn't really generate anything. I mean, it's basically it's like a couple of $100 a month, which is like nothing. So, but Udemy is definitely the best one. Yes, absolutely.
So how did you pick Udemy? Because I don't think I've ever used Udemy before. Maybe one other time, and because and then I started using your courses. Like, there's so many of these platforms. So, like, what's great about Udemy? Because from a user perspective, it seems fine, but from a content creator perspective, is it like particularly good?
From a content creator, yes. I'm not sure how I came across Udemy. It was such a long time ago, so I'm not really sure how I came across it. But when I started, probably around like 2015 late or 2016 early. I submitted a test video, which pretty much everyone test video gets approved. So they just test that if your mic is okay and your sound is okay and blah, blah, blah. And after that, it's basically your own pace. You just create a course, you just upload the videos, and you press the publish button. You set your own pricing, but we all know that no matter what price you set, usually it sells between like $10 to $15 or something like that. So you can set any price you want, but it's always going to be set at...
You can set any price as long as it's $10.
As long as it's $10. So it's more about the quantity, because Udemy is also pushing your content in their advertisement on Facebook and everywhere. So
it's like an app store for courses.
Yes,
and I assume they take a cut. Is that how it works? So you do it you could put it up for free, but they take a cut.
Yeah. So my courses, so they have a different kind of a revenue-based system. If you enroll in my course using the coupon that I've distributed, like whatever coupon I'm giving you, then I get to keep like 98 to 99% of the profit, but it's $10. Wow. So we all know it's going to be just $10.
So it's a lot of profit.
So, but if somebody enrolled through Udemy, because Udemy is advertising on Facebook and other mediums, then it's reversed. Basically, I get to keep like $2 or $3 and Udemy keep the rest. But then there's Udemy for Business also. So this means that if you have a subscription for Udemy for Business, you get a lot of courses in that particular business membership. And I think my courses are also added. The SwiftData course just got added yesterday, which is kind of weird because it just got released a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
So I get some revenue from there also.
I've used Pluralsight a lot at work because that's like the system. They had like a business, whatever they call it, subscription. So they had a certain number of seats for the university I work at, so you could get. And I've used that, and I mean it's fine. Like all these services are fine, but I mean, so for you, I guess the other question is, what do you use to actually make them? Do you use like ScreenFlow or something else to make the actual course?
So I'm pretty much a minimalistic in terms of what I use. So I use the mic that I'm using right now, which is the Apple headset or Apple earplugs or earphone, whatever they're called. That comes
pretty good though.
That comes with the iPhone, and I use Camtasia. And
Camtasia.
And for annotation, which is live, I do live annotations. So those are Demo Pro, which I think costs like $4 or $5 or something, if I remember.
Oh wow!
So that's pretty much it. 3 things.
All right, we are hitting the 1 hour mark, or if we've already passed it, I think.
That's okay. I'm enjoying the conversation, but we have to be mindful. Azam has SwiftData tutorials.
He's got tons. He's got tons of tutorials. So if you can please provide all your contact info, or how do they say that?
Where can we find more Azam
about? Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter. So I'm Azam Sharp on Twitter, AZAMSHARP. And that's my main, I guess, social media account, which I use, which is pretty active.
Okay. And of course, you have a website.
Yeah, azamsharp.com. That is where I post the articles, and you will have links to my courses over there.
And you have there's like a Udemy page for you as well, I assume?
Yeah, there's a Udemy page. I would just go to azamsharp.com and click on one of the courses. It will take you to Udemy with the referral link already applied.
Oh, excellent. Okay, we'll do it. We'll make sure in the show notes there'll be links to your Twitter and to your website.
Yep.
And his YouTube channel.
And the YouTube channel, which we love. I'm subscribed.
Yes.
I get notified when stuff gets posted.
Cool. Well, that's all we have for today. You can learn more about Philly Cocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you'll find links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, contact info, and I guess that's it. If you're feeling generous, please leave a review on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is. And please share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Normally at this point, we have jokes, usually programmer dad jokes. But I asked Azam to provide me with kind of like advice for people who, one bit of advice for aspiring developers, iOS developers, one bit of advice for sort of kind of intermediate to senior level developers, and then one bit of advice for advanced developers. And that can come in the form of a link, a book, one of his Udemy courses. The oyster is yours. So.
Yeah. I think for beginner developers, when you're starting, I think start with the mindset that if you're learning programming or you're going into programming or coding, it's kind of like a lifelong journey. You're not going to be expert in like a month or two. So you will become maybe like a junior developer in 4 or 5 months, but it will take a long time. So you have to be consistent and you have to persevere all the stuff that you're going to be doing. But for references, if you are doing iOS development, I think, and if you are looking for video-based course, it will be probably Angela Wu. Angela Wu is also on Udemy, and she is catering towards the market of mostly like beginner developers. So her courses are much catered toward beginners. So if you're a beginner, you should probably start over there. You can also start with WWDC videos, but keep in mind WWDC videos can obviously a little bit, there are advanced stuff. I mean, even they're introductory, but you should start with something really basic. Apart from that, hacking with Swift from Paul Hudson, or the 100 days of Swift and SwiftUI, that definitely will be helpful. Become part of the community, attend, iOS dev happy hours, and as a developer, you have to start creating those connections. For a person who is going from or at the intermediate level, I think at the intermediate level, you should be experimenting with a lot of other I would say, architectural patterns. You should start thinking about, critically thinking about that. Why are you using this? Is there a better way to do this? You should not just accept that, okay, everybody's doing it, so I should just do it too. You should critically think about, why did we use it? Is this the right approach? What mistakes did I do? And how can I improve it? For intermediate developers, I would shamelessly plug in my courses, because I think those are for intermediate developers. I don't really do beginner stuff. So if you are intermediate developers, you can check out my Udemy courses. And for senior developers, which I think they usually move into the direction of management, but senior developers, either if you're going to the management route, then obviously you are there to cater your developers, like the developers group. You need to make sure they have all the required stuff to do their job. But if you are in a senior architect kind of a position, then again, you will have to be deciding on the factors that why we should choose one architecture over the other. So you're kind of like in charge of the much bigger picture. You may not be coding on day-to-day basis if you're very senior, but you will be responsible for the overall architecture, like what sync mechanism that we should use, what will be, if should we use microservices, is it a monolith app application? So at very high level, you'll be making those decisions. And I think your job will be to just make sure you're available to your intermediate developers and junior developers at least for intermediate developers, to guide them and to make sure that they have everything to do their job. So I think those are the three classes I see.
All right. Well, thank you, Azam, for joining us today. Till next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.